We're just about ready to get started here. Hopefully the microphone and new sound system, we have some new equipment here, so hopefully we'll have this adjusted all correctly here. Welcome to the new season of monthly history talks here at the Schmidt House, presented by the Olympia Tumwater Foundation. Our director is John Friedman, and so we may have to crank this volume up here in a little bit, but my name's Don Trosper, and I'm the new guy here at the Olympia Tumwater Foundation, but Trosper Road's named for our family, so I've got a lot of historic interest, and that's my hobby, but now I get paid half-time because I'm now the public history manager, just this week, of the Olympia Tumwater Foundation. So it's an honor to be able to honor Tumwater's history this way and actually get paid for it. It's the thing I love to do. But anyway, it's a historic house. Welcome to the Schmidt House, built in 1904 by the Olympia Tumwater Foundation. So you're in a historic town, in a historic house, honoring a historic family. So we're about ready to bring up our speakers. Today it's actually plural. We have George Heidgerken, who's the property owner of the Old Brewhouse now, and his project manager is Jon Potter. And I think we're going to go ahead and bring George up here. And so George and John both are...
There you go. That was nice of you. Thank you very much. John and I are going to talk a little bit about what we know, what we're doing, and where we're going with this project. And everybody asks me, why in the heck did you buy it in the first place? And I drive by here all the day. I live in Centralia, so I go by all the time. I always wonder why somebody didn't do something. 5 years ago, whatever. So I started checking into it, found out that it was available, and negotiated a price and bought it. And then got started with the project in reference to the legacy of the history and the legacy of the property itself. And in doing so, I found out why nobody bought it. You can see that this project is a really sensitive project to be done right. And anytime you do something right in the way of a historic landmark, it takes time. Time costs money, and so what you look at is how is this all going to fit? Who are the players, and how do they fit if they fit? And so Jon Potter, which I'll introduce right now. John, come on over. He's bashful, he didn't want to be here. So John and I took the project on, started from the basic of the history of the project, and we've done this before, and we have other projects like this, and we like this one a lot. Fits within the community, it fits within the support of, if it makes dollars, it makes sense. We believe this makes dollars, makes sense. And as part of that, we intend to follow through with our plans. You never know what somebody's thinking unless you do some sketches and layouts. That's what you see out front when we did the layouts for the property. And in those, we took into consideration what's here. We hired the right folks in reference to doing a historic study. So we knew the game plan for what we were trying to pull off and just move forward with that. And the pictures you're seeing now are obviously the project when it first started with all the different things. And the legacy of this thing is the more you know about it, the more you get intrigued with all the possibilities because it's endless. It has potential for a lot of different things. So what we looked at is we'd like to make this into a historical site, but also in relative to, it's a brew site, obviously, but we didn't want to turn it into something that was, and won't turn it into something that's all about brewing beer. It'll be a lot about brewing beer, but it's going to be a family-oriented destination. So you can feel good about taking your kids and jogging the water and doing all that stuff. At the same time, be able to stay here. We intend to put in a pubs, restaurants, all that. And we have lots of players who'd like to be here, and very good ones too. Not just, some qualified folks that would be good for the neighborhood and good for what's going on. And then we looked at it from the standpoint of You know, there's 500-600 microbreweries and things like that in Oregon, and there's a list. So what you want to do is go through that and see who fits the best. And then when you start projects like this, you really don't know where they're going to end up with them. Because what happens as you go along, people show up that you would never expect to show up. And that's what happened with, and John will speak about it, in reference to, we have some universities interested. The brewing industry and the wine industry really have taken off. So all of a sudden there's a lot of impact on sites like this to do special things. And we just want to make sure that those special things fit within the community and within what we're trying to accomplish here. And so that takes a lot of time, and you got to be patient. The hardest thing now is in the public sector is slow. Every time you move forward, you want to build this, you want to do this, you got to make sure you go back, and with the legacy of what's going on here, those permits with all the permits and the timing required to do them right, it takes a lot of time to do that. So it looks like you're not doing a thing when you're actually busy as heck. And that's what we're doing. But we intend to do the community, ourselves, and everybody a really good job on this site. And we intend to, this is a site that you can invest $500 million real easy. It's not one, numbers on the basis right now, and just a minimum basis is about 175 million. But when you're done with the project, because you don't know where you're going with some of this stuff, that 175 reflects a value based on about 300,000 square feet. That's what we're setting on. And you can run numbers backwards, forwards, doesn't matter, until you get a master plan that fits and the permits to do that, you'll do it. So what we're looking at is a real process here. And we're right in the middle of it. We're not going to change. And we're pretty well committed to do that. And so I'll have John talk more about the other end of it. It's all
You
yours.
still have about a half hour left for it.
I'm going to speak Spanish for the rest of the class.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the Olympia Tumwater Foundation Board. The photos and plans that you see and will be seeing during this presentation are on loan from the foundation. And it is a real treasure, because from our perspective, when we're trying to restore the buildings, we actually have the plans and photos that gives us the ability to be authentic about the restoration. And in concert with that, George hired an architectural historian to help, and Chris Ann Beckner prepared a historic structures report, which went through and evaluated. She did interviews, she looked at records, and did a study that shows what the history of each building is, what the significance is from a historic standpoint, so that when we go through the historic review process of the permitting, she will be a real asset to make sure that not only is the restoration authentic, but also help us through that review process. And so that's a very important part of this. There's also, and excuse me for being a bit disjointed here, there's going to be questions and answers, and hopefully that'll bring everything to a little more coherent end to this conversation. But one of the things I'd like to stress is when George got on board, a lot of the work that I do is, oftentimes it's in the feasibility side. And so when George comes to me, and this has been ongoing I've known George for a long time. He's my client, but he's also a good friend. And when he asked me to take a look at projects such as this, my response is no, 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 no. Oh boy, this is going to be fun. Because, and it gives me some, question about how much he actually listens to my advice. But fortunately, George is the buyer of this property, and from an economic standpoint, it was somewhat of a leap of faith. This was basically a manufacturing project, and the vision is to create it into a mixed-use project. Well, the infrastructure is entirely different. The road, the access, utilities, everything's different. And so, if you're looking at it strictly from a money standpoint, not to say that you could or anybody would want to, it'd be cheaper to demolish the buildings and rebuild it. That obviously is not going to happen, and that's the reason why George bought it, was to restore the buildings. So you've got a great property owner here that shares the vision of the restoration of the buildings in creating a truly family-friendly mixed-use development. There's a number of things that have been going on in the background, and frankly, a lot of the progress is attributable to Mayor Pete Commit, John Doan, the city administrator, Michael Cade at Economic Development, in terms of helping forge this public-private partnership. The idea is to create truly a public element to this overall project. And the vision is to create frankly, a destination project that has a craft brewery center and a distillery center for the entire state. And so there's partners that have been, that are forming to support that endeavor. They include, of course, the city, Economic Development Council, the state of Washington, Washington State University's at the table, Puget Sound Community College is at the table. That Washington State has a joint program with the University of Idaho. There's been discussions with the Hops Commission and Agriculture Department. So the idea here is not just to create, the idea is to restore the tower as it originally was, and that was a gravity flow system for craft brewers, but also to create incubator space for new craft brewers, bring in experienced brewers that can serve as mentors, have a science program that brings the agriculture side of brewing to the table, and create this synergy that is beyond just the city of, it creates a catalyst for other development in terms of the mixed use. For example, a boutique hotel, restaurants, some residential down there, and to really create a catalyst for and a development that brings people in beyond just the city limits, beyond just the county, beyond, and has a statewide recognition, but the opportunity is national recognition because of the teaching side of it, because of the science and craft brewing. It is a remarkable opportunity. And what is also just floors me is the amount of public support to create this catalytic development that has its own momentum now. There's a number of studies that have been done. The city started this back in the 90s in terms of analyzing the site. They commissioned a firm by the name of Parametrics, an architectural firm, and excuse me, I'm going blank, at any rate, to do some infrastructure analyses, cost estimating. That was back in the 90s. This idea preceded the sale of the property, and there's been a continuation of that effort to the point where there's an environmental impact statement underway for the development. There's cultural resource analysis that's going on. There has been an economic study that's underway right now to evaluate and help draw this public-private partnership to the next level. And that's ultimately, at the end of the day, I envision it may be a different vehicle, a developer's agreement at the end of the day, where all of the participants, the partners, are going to be part of this development team, utilizing space down here for classrooms, for science program in terms of maybe labs, as well as the incubator space. And so there's a lot of reason to be very excited about what's happening. This is a big deal. This is a big deal for Tumwater, for the county, for the state, and for the Northwest in terms of having a very unique facility that is unparalleled. Now, there's a lot of challenges to get there. There's a hillside behind the brewery that, there's some questions about the stability. And one of the challenges is, with the enormous cost of the infrastructure, how do we mitigate that cost so it's a lendable project? Part of that is providing public benefits that warrant public investment. Part of that is also looking for ways to mitigate some of the concerns we have so that, for example, one of the trees doesn't fall down on one of the buildings. And ways to do that are to provide better drainage on that hillside. There's remarkably a lot of drainage infrastructure in there that has never been maintained, or has not been maintained in decades. And so in order to provide the drainage that's necessary to stabilize that slope, and providing some retaining walls to stabilize that slope, to protect these buildings, we've got to figure a way to offset those costs. One way is to maybe put in a residential structure, condominium or apartment. I like that idea simply because you've got a railroad track that comes through the site. Nobody's there other than George has hired a security person who's there 24 hours a day. But it's such a big site, it's tough to protect. But if you have residents there, they take ownership in that protection. And so they take ownership not just in their unit, but also in the entire property. And that provides security for the hotel, for the restaurants that are in operation after hours. And that's an important consideration when we're doing our master plan. The other part of it is there's not enough parking. So in order to make this work, it's critical that there's a parking garage. And to inset those two into that hillside to provide the stabilization is really important to protect the buildings, but also offset the cost of having to stabilize that slope. Now, this is a phased development. Initially, as you drove in, you went past the old Sellers building with a sheared-off wall. George has had structural engineers in there, architects in there, has done a considerable amount of work just cleaning it up, including asbestos removal. If you've gone down below, there was a lot of hazardous material that's been cleaned up. There's the old paint shop. That's been cleaned up. Monitoring wells will be installed shortly for that area. But the Sellers building, with the feedback that we've gotten, is a remarkably good structure to build on. And so part of the vision, as you'll see in the lobby, are some illustrations that show a brick facade on that to create a gateway coming in to the site that provides anybody that's going down below an understanding that there's a transition coming into the site. And it's not a historic building as the buildings down below, but we want to create that understanding that they're entering a very special place. And so there's a lot of design detail that's gone into what that building will look like from the exterior. The question is going to be what's on the interior. There's a study underway right now. Consultants have just been hired to interview these other partners, public and institutional partners, to see what their spatial needs would be if they're involved in the project. And so we're waiting for that study to determine what uses might be appropriate for the Sellers building before we move forward with the actual improvements on the interior. But that's going to be done by the end of this year. And the market analysis is done. There's a tremendous amount of work that's been underway over the last few years. A lot of the credit goes to the city. American Mint, John Doan, and staff, and then again, Economic Development Council. Without that partnership, this stuff wouldn't be going, you'd be seeing a new development, but the significance of the development wouldn't be as big as what we're seeing right now. And there's a lot of traction for this to happen, so we're very excited about it. And hopefully, next year, you're going to see some evidence of that happening. I'm sure I missed a number of issues you'd like addressed. It's a little daunting giving a talk here because there's people in this audience that have far more historic understanding of what this represents than we do. And so this is going to be a true partnership, not just public-private partnership, but also with those who have historic knowledge of what the opportunity is in terms of the restoration of these buildings.
Good. You believe all that stuff? And the bottom line is, it's a sensitive project, and from the aspect of doing the project, you look at it as a investment person like myself. You look at it and say, I don't want any private partnership. I don't want anybody. I just soon do my own thing, do my own project. That doesn't happen when you got Jon Potter. Because Potter, he's one of these guys who, and we get along really good about this, likes the association of everybody, and so do I. We have other projects like this, maybe a little bigger, but have the same sensitivity. And as a developer, you either get used to it or get out, because you won't make it. You'll make it if you do it the way we're doing it, although you get reporters, you get people who really want to know, well, what have you built? Where's your hotel? Where's this? If you understand the process with SEPA and all the other stuff, we've always wanted to put another lane on the road to come down to the site so it'd make it easy access. And you can't do those things without going through a lot of engineering studies and a lot of review. That's what's going on right now. We'll end up with a really good project on this, whether everybody joins in or not. Everything that's happening right now is good for the community, it's good for me, it's good for what's going on, and more importantly, it's really good for the site. This thing's been sitting here for a long time, and it's time that somebody does all of this stuff. We can all think and have ideas of what we want, but what you want you may get or you may not get, and it's really the process that tells you that. If you try hard enough and try to maintain a structure, I can guarantee you every structure you're looking at there doesn't meet any code of today. No way. So if you do build it, you can build those things. You're just going to have to spend a lot of money figuring out how with all the new rules and regulations. We want to make this a public site. So that means if we get a parking structure, we have a lot more room out front for landscaping and all the public things that really make water work. The folks who are looking at doing the waterfront walkways and trails, as a private developer, you can't do that. The process of getting a permit to build on the water like that is really impossible. You can think that way and you can do cute little drawings, but to get those permits, you're going to have a lot of behind you. So that's what really helps with bringing in the right guys to do that, because they can. And if you have to give up whatever you have to give up in a project, it's worth it. And when you look at sites like this, the remodeling costs of just the main building with the old brew house in the front is right around $3 million. And the reason it's $3 million is because it's not only historic, you can't touch the outside brick, so you build your building from the inside out. Leave the outside alone, build your new building in the inside. And that's gunite, rebar, redo it, make it safe. The nicest thing about this building especially, the nicest thing is all the elevator shafts that are there are big. Most buildings that are old are little. This thing's got really nice ones, so they're really usable for folks to view. You can put them in the elevator, run them up shaft, show them everything, bring them down. There's a really lot of very neat things that you can do with this project if you spend the time and the funds to get there. So John and I both like what's going on with the city and the cooperation we're getting from the public end of it. And we should end up with a very attractive project when we're done with this and benefit.
As we start the question and answer, my aspect is local history interest, and I know you've had to deal with that in your preparations for the project and look into the Schmidt family and the history of the buildings. What most impresses you, each of you, about the history of the Schmidt family and how this all started? There's a little bit of historic tidbits that impresses you the most.
That's you.
Don, you're supposed to throw softer questions.
I'm not asking you to be a historian, but it's just...
You know, that's the toughest question because we can give you an honest answer, but we're going to omit something that's really important and offend someone. So, but I'll give you a straight shot, the best I can. The Schmidt family created this remarkable, phenomenal complex. And there's such rich history here. And then to follow it up with a foundation that is a nonprofit, philanthropic organization that creates opportunities for high school seniors to move on to college. And as a neighbor, you couldn't pick a better neighbor because they have this rich history that's basically the foundation of what we're trying to restore. And the resources in terms of the photos that I spoke of before and the plans that gives us the opportunity to do something truly authentic is a great opportunity. So the other thing that I might add is developers sometimes aren't the smartest breed in the world when they go ahead with a project. They're simply looking at it simplistically in terms of what can I finance? What's my return on investment? Really, this project demands that you look beyond just the property lines. You look at the neighbors. For example, and that's exactly what the city has done in terms of creating a brewery district, so that there's a larger perspective to look at than just the restoration of these buildings. It's a key part of it, but the idea is to make the entire brewery district, which is inclusive of the foundation and the tremendous park that it manages and created, a bigger success than it already is. And so when we're looking at the project, we're looking at tying in trails and enhancing the opportunities of our neighbors at the same time that we're moving forward with our project. And so that's, Don, that's one answer. But if you ask me this tomorrow, I might be able to give you a little better one, yeah. But that's a pretty darn good one, I
Does
think.
George have a perspective of what impresses you most about the Schmidt family as you've looked at the research and something
Good.
that really stands
I
out to
didn't
you?
hear that. Not all.
About the Schmidt family, about your impressions of the history of the place, what stands out to you?
Well, the whole thing does, the whole site. I mean, there's no way you're gonna get around any of those questions. It is what it is. You don't buy into a project like this at all and spend the money it takes unless you understand the validity and the legacy of the site itself. And it's not a matter of do we spend the money to do what we're supposed to do in reference to that, you do it. And you do it with the understanding that it's better for you and it's better for the project. This is a really good project that nobody has taken on. That thing sat there for 10 years, went downhill, and I don't care who's in the audience, nobody stepped up. And so you gotta be careful. When you step up on something like this, you gotta know that there are a ton of players out there that if they had the capital and they had the way of doing it, they'd have done it. But because of that, they didn't. And that just requires somebody with not as much smarts as them to step up. And so what you do is you figure all that out, and then you say, this is worth doing. And then you spend what it takes. We are prepared to do the right thing Our biggest problem on sites like this are getting the permits to do it. And they're not simple. There's nothing easy about going down and, I want a building permit for this, you won't get it. We went in for storm drain permit, just a temporary type thing, because we had a lot of water coming off Custer and going down through the hill there. So let's get it, and they gave me a manual about that big and said, here, meet these codes and you're okay. Well, you couldn't do that. And, but I did take the book because I said, I got a big fireplace, so bring it on. So the bottom line is these are really sensitive projects, fun to do and expensive. The fun overruns itself if you get to a place where you're not moving forward. And John's job with me, and we've been doing this for 10, 15 years, John's job is to make sure all the players and everybody is putting their 2 bits in, saying what they want to say, and seeing if we can make them fit within the project. Go ahead.
I'll just interrupt you right there, because speaking of players, what I found interesting about the formal letter of mutual public-private partnership is that there were no tribes as co-signers on that letter. The county, city of Olympia, there's a few people missing so far in your conversation.
Yeah,
So
and
I was
this is,
wondering if you could address
They're all
that.
signed.
no, this is an evolving process. And the idea is to be as inclusive as we can. This is not that letter that you saw is not the end all to what we intend. Part of that answer is going to be addressed in the environmental impact statement so that we've got a better idea, understanding of what tribal interests are involved, because there's a number of overlapping tribes that may have an interest in that. Now, we know that the city has taken some effort to try to ferret that out, understand what the issues are. But as a starting point, we're delighted with how far along it's come. But that is no indication at the expectation at the end of the day. And so the idea is to be inclusive of that, and we'll get there. But as this is a very complex project. There's a lot of moving parts that we have to figure out, and we will get there. But it's important at the same time that if you see something such as that appears to be missing in what we're doing, it's important for you to bring it to our attention, bring it to the city's attention, because we don't want to, at the end of the day, say, be kicking ourselves because we missed an opportunity. Now, there's going to be a cultural element to this. It's not just architectural history. There's also a cultural side of it, and that's what the EIS is addressing. The scoping document came out fairly recently. There's a lot of effort in terms of that analysis that will be conducted as part of that environmental impact statement. The draft will be issued. There will be opportunities to provide comments to that, and then a final EIS is issued. And so whatever we proceed with in terms of the development plans, that EIS is a substantive document. And so we're going to be looking at that, as the city will be, in terms of how do we integrate that into our plans.
And the deadline is October 20th for public comment.
And this is an iterative process, and even after the EIS is issued, we're still open for input on our plans, and that's going to be when we submit our plans, the city's going to be looking at those plans in context with the analysis and suggested mitigations that are in that SEPA document. But it'll also be looked at in context with adopted policies and regulations. So there's a number of overlying layers here that will ensure that we do address those issues.
Mr. Potter, you mentioned that you expect all of us to be investing in this project and that our investment would be justified by public benefits. How much money are you talking about, and from which entities, and what sort of public benefits are you speaking of?
Well, and again, that's going to be somewhat of an iterative process. The Cardinal Group is a consulting group that was selected to evaluate that very issue. And they have just gotten started with that study to interview those those prospective partners to understand what level of engagement they're comfortable participating in and what they bring to the table. It's be presumptuous for us at this point to say, gee, we need this. It's an iterative process, it's a collaborative process, and we're just getting started with that. That's just getting underway. I can give you some examples of what the public benefits can be on this. It's the trails, access to water, tying some trails to potentially the Olympia Tumwater Foundation's park and the historic park across the river, possibly a trail system that goes along the outer edge of South Capitol Lake and maybe eventually tie into the city of Olympia. Public access to see the craft brewing process. This is a nationally unique gravity flow system, and actually see how that works. And then having access to, hopefully there's going to be a science and educational program that the public can actually see what craft brewing is all about, and the incubator opportunities for startup companies. So there's an economic element to it. And there will undoubtedly be other opportunities for public benefits that come out of this. But that process is just getting underway. And that's a process of engagement to solicit information. George mentioned open space down below for potentially, and I'm saying underscore potentially, because we don't know the impacts of it, but there may be maybe concerts down below, or a park area, or we don't know yet. We've received some positive feedback from some non-profit organizations interested in the access to the water and possibly a boardwalk along the river and along South Capitol Lake. But again, these are formulative stages, and the answer's not clear yet.
I think a big part of that too is that when we started this process, we didn't go out looking for funding from the public for anything. This process was built around what I wanted to do, and then all of a sudden the public impact of this property became very apparent. So then Jon took over and started talking with all the other folks in reference, and they made the initial contact with us to step up and do things that they wanted to do on this property because it's special. And I looked at it and I said, okay, let's walk the dog with it and see where it goes. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work, we're okay with that. This is fundable for us to do with or without public input. But the public input is so important to make things a community project. And that's what we did. So we said, and today we don't know if any of the folks that we're talking with are in a position to commit to anything. By the way, all the photos you're seeing are old photos when we bought it. They're not what's out there now. All of this thing has been cleaned up. We spent over $1 million just cleaning the site and doing the environmental. When you buy something, everybody says it's all clean. Don't worry about your environmental. It's not there. That's not a true statement on anything. So what we did is we went back in and redid it. When we took out a building, and our plans and designs on the outside encompass building a structure next to the hill to keep it from sliding. In the 40s they had slides. There are a lot of things going on with this site. So what we're trying to do is figure out what went on, how it drains, how it works, how it fits, and then how our new site fits in with all that. And the public came into this as a real players in reference to doing the right thing for parking, all the other things, and to make it a site that, we had the opportunity not to rezone, to do other things. We had plenty of users for the building on the commercial-based stuff, but that didn't do a thing for anybody, just use the buildings. So what we wanted to do is take it to the next level. And the next level is, let's get the right players, let's get the right breweries, the right restaurants, And even the little stuff like restrooms. You know, we got jogging trails and all kinds of stuff. And if you go out there and look at some of these cancer drives and some of the drives they run through that park area, there are a lot of people. And we didn't want to build a facility that had really good restrooms in your restaurant, but all this public. So what we did is we designed a really big, nice public restroom area for all the folks that are jogging and doing all that stuff. So the impact, we thought out the impact of the public on our project and looked at that from the standpoint of if you're, you know, we have some great tenants that want to go in here. They're really good players, good people. And they would be automatically accepted because they're good at what they do. That's really important. And so we looked at that and said, one of their biggest comments is, I don't want all that public walkway stuff in my restaurant. So we designed a facility to do that. And the main building that we're talking about, the new one, is right between this one that went out. We designed a building that's out there with the same look, the same everything, but that's a basic building for the elevators and restrooms for the general public. And the trails and the waterfront out front were laid out, and we have lots of players who'd like to put that in as far as users. When anybody does anything for you, they've got their hand out at the same time. So you've got to remember, there's no free rides, and this is not a free ride for anybody. It's not a free ride for the public, certainly not a free ride for me, but it's a project worth doing. And it's about time that somebody steps up and does it. And if I have to be the one to do that, we intend to do it. We're not backing down on anything we're trying to accomplish. What we're trying to do is get the general public to understand what we're trying to do. And that's unique.
There's just one caveat here I'd like to maybe better respond to your question, and that is, any public investment has to be commensurate with the public benefit. And so there's matrices that establish what that means. And that, again, will be a joint decision between the participants, whether that's Olympia Tumwater Foundation or the Port of Olympia, whoever those participants are. That's a discussion to figure out how to make it a win-win opportunity for all parties involved. You know, another obvious element of this project is going to be interpretive trails, both culturally and historically, but possibly even a museum. If the Olympia Tumwater Foundation's inclined, and possibly through participation with the city, a museum of sorts to provide a better vehicle for visitors to understand what this site actually represents. So there's a lot of opportunities, but we don't have a laundry list put together yet in terms of what those public amenities will be. That, again, is an iterative process and a public process to determine what those include.
You mentioned you've done other projects that are somewhat similar to this. Can you give the public a list of those projects so people can go and see what your track record looks like?
That's kind of like the hotel. Where's your hotel? Well, I can tell you the projects. The projects is in Oregon City, the falls there is the largest falls in the West Coast. It's huge. And it's a property of about 25, 30 acres, about 2 million feet of buildings. It's called the Blue Herring Project. It's a hot project for the state of Oregon. It's got folks, it's got senators, governors, all kinds of folks going through it. And I own that project, and it's one that has, it's all waterfront. It's right on the water. And it covers, well, the general public has never had access to the falls for 152 years, something like that. And so they really jumped on it the minute it became available. And it's just like this. All waterfront projects are difficult. But that project, they throw at you grants that run from $5 million to $85 million. They're huge. It's an incredible piece of ground, that has the end of the Oregon Trail. It's all kinds of stuff. And it's online, and anybody can see it. And we went through zone change, and we got approval on the zone change for multiple mixed use. And that was done yesterday. And the project's moving really well, just like this one. But you talk about public impact. We have been to, I don't know how many meetings, but it's like this. Everybody shows up and everybody has, that's as sensitive as this one. And if we don't do them both right, we wish we had, but we intend to do both. And we're figured our funding out on both projects. The other one we have is at Chambers Bay, next to the US Open. About a 70-acre site there on the water, strategic between, it's the only piece left for the golf course. And our friend Bob comes through town. Bob's the guy who just announced a new hotel at the site. He's spending, I don't know, it looks like $100 to $150 million for a hotel. It was advertised in the paper, stuff. And there's a lot of guys and a lot of companies out there that if you do it right, show them what you want to do, and it fits within the criteria of the area, the stuff, you can bring on some really nice, neat guys. And along with that comes some really pretty incredible funding available, not in the way of grants, but in the way of participation in doing projects. And so John and I have basically 3 sites on water, all historical, and all belong in a category of the right thing as far as tourism, all that. We can fit them into a plan that just doesn't bring them here, but brings them to all 3 sites. We're the only ones that could do that with the sites that we have. We haven't done that. That's 2 years, 3 years down the road. But we will do it eventually because they all fit in. So there is a master plan in process, is a thinking process. Whether it gets there or not, it's up to John and I and what we do. But we're on board with, and this is a high priority. I've been in this project long enough, I'm well funded to do it, and we really like the idea of getting it to the public as much as we possibly can. You don't want to do a project like this without getting the public impact, because you wish you had. So going through all this, when we're done and we start construction, that should eliminate all the resistance from what we're doing. And we hope it does.
When do you think you'll be finished with the project, so I can go? My lifetime?
You know, that's a good one, because I don't think you're ever done with them. I think projects like this, as far as, it's more like, I look at it as when will the first public access to the property be? And that's like finishing the warehouse on the top on Custer. And that's the first one, because the rest of them is going to take permits, it's going to take another 2 years before you'll be able to do anything in reference to that. Maybe not that long, but maybe. And everybody we work with in our end of funding these projects are saying now. The rates are such that are really, now's a good time to do a lot of this. You can't do it without a permit. So you got to get through the process, get a permit, and as far as timing goes on these, they're as fast as we can get a permit to do it. And that means getting your SEPA and all the other plans. We came real close on the project around Custer of having some problems with distance from the river. We had to run a line down to the river and have it surveyed back to the building, because if the building's set within 10 feet or so much closer, then that project wouldn't move forward for another 2 or 3 years. It didn't. We lucked out by 20 feet or so. So that meant we were okay to do stuff. But things like that happen. And whether it's in structural design, these buildings are really overbuilt. Just beautiful buildings where you're looking at rebar that's 1.25 inches and big, heavy stuff. So they're really built. If you take the structure up above at 5-story, you weigh up all the beer that was stored in that building, you're allowed to go 8 stories higher with that building. Now, it's already over the building code limit, 37 feet. So you're not going to do that. But what you do is, those are good things to know when you're doing your layouts and how you're doing your building inside. They have a lot to say with the look you did. And we wanted to make this whole project brick. And we didn't want the shiny brick. We want the brick that looks like it's been there 200 years. So that takes even color and all that sensitivity to that look is important. And that's what we're doing.
You know, just a further comment, this property is owned outright. There's no interest accruing on the project. And when I get involved in a project, that has a big determining factor in terms of what's the timeline. Because you have, yeah, you have interest accruing, so you're in a race to get things done quickly so that you can maintain the profit margins that are necessary in order to secure loans. This is a unique situation where that doesn't exist. That pressure, where sometimes a developer will have to start taking shortcuts, otherwise he'll lose the property to the bank because he's getting overextended, doesn't exist here. So we're in a very good position here where we've got the flexibility to do it the right way because we don't have that pressure. At the same time, I think we all have expectations that want to see this done the right way, quicker, sooner than later. But we're very process-oriented in this state. There is a process we go through, and it's not just George's decision. It's also because the agencies of jurisdiction are involved in this, primarily the city of Tumwater. They're required by state law to go through a certain process to get this thing done as well. So it would be nice to say, gee, the tower's going to be done in 2.5 years. It's not that easy to predict.
I just want to be alive.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends feel that way too. They said, when you design this project, you make sure that the really, really good handicap access, because I'm going to be in a wheelchair 10 years down.
We have about 10 more minutes, and I'd like to open it up for more questions, especially from the back of the room. We have and this person here.
So, could you go back a couple of slides? I mean, we can go out there and look at those pictures, and I didn't look at them before, but give us a scope of what you envision some of those. You've got a conceptual drawing there, and what you envision in some of that stuff. I mean, you've
Yes.
talked about it, and I'm trying to picture it all.
And you're speaking to two very technologically challenged people here. So
We'll be glad to do that. There is one photo in here that addresses the whole site. I don't know if you can find it, but it has everything in it.
Yeah.
We'd be glad to talk, because there is a reason why every single building is where it is.
I'd like to bring up one thing that we didn't address, and that is, one of the first things that George did was retain a structural engineer right off the bat to take a look, just more than going through each building and evaluating. And what became very apparent right off the bat was there was an infill building extending between the tower and the warehouse, extending all the way down to the keg building, a long, big building. And it was supported by beams, metal beams coming out from both buildings, and it was pulling the walls outward. So one of the first things that was done was to, based upon the structural engineer's very strong recommendation, is get rid of that building now, because it's having a very detrimental effect on the tower and the warehouse. That's one of the things that was done. The idea is to recreate that building that extended down there. Obviously, to meet seismic code requirements and better structural design than what was originally designed in the first place. But I'm afraid, simply because we've got a computer here, I know where the mouse and the on button is. That's about it, but we'll be happy to talk to you out in the lobby afterwards.
Well, for example, there's 3 alternatives that you're being faced with. Number 1 is no action in the EIS. Number 2, a variety of mixed uses, including the parking stall or the parking garage being about 625 stalls. Alternative 3 includes residential condos with a parking garage with 100 parking stalls. Or 1,000, sorry, 1,000.
Yeah, and those are baselines basically for impact analysis and appropriate mitigations. And that's an analysis that provides some benchmarks on a less intensive development to a build-out development. And so when George goes in with his plans, the city will be evaluating those plans respective to the appropriate mitigations based upon the size of development as it relates to that environmental impact statement. And there will be a lot of discussions with the city in terms of how do we meet the necessary mitigations to provide a project that meets code, meets policy, and is functional, is a good functional development. The worst thing that we can do is, if you're gonna have a boutique hotel and you're gonna have restaurants and maybe some retail associated with this, and residential, the worst thing we can do is under-design it in context with those mitigations are not just in terms of meeting policy, but it's also critically important to make it a functional development where people actually want to go down there. There is a convenient place to park. If there's someone that's elderly or someone that has strollers, that they can get in and out easily. So it has to be functionally close. Otherwise, those retailers and hotel are not going to survive. So there's also, that EIS is valuable for us as well in terms of making those evaluations. And that hasn't been, the draft hasn't been issued yet, but when it is, we're going to be looking at it carefully because the tenants are going to be very, very concerned about making sure that it fits their development requirements. Good access, visible access from, ideally retailers like to have side of line vision from where they park to the front door of where they're going. And that's going to be very difficult to do on this project, but we've got to think very carefully how we design it so that the worst thing that could happen is that you develop it, you have tenants, and after 3 years they're not surviving and they go away. It's got to be sustainable.
And the players that we have that we talk to now, it's not hard to get some really good guys who want to be there because of the significance and location and everything else. It's pretty easy to do. And when you look at the EIS and the studies, the number one is no action. That's called earthquake. Then you go around picking up the bricks and shipping them out because you can't afford not to have some action on a site like this. You've got to move forward. And this project will move forward, and it should be for the benefit of me and benefit of the general public. That's the intent. And the intent is to make it sustainable so it stays there, shows there. So when somebody comes to town, it's a show place. You want to take them there. And if we don't build it to make it look like that and do the right things, you're not going to want to take them there. So, and I know the difference. And so with that, and all the consultants you get there, all there, and the public, will make this project that type of project. It's a pain in the neck time-wise. And that's why John mentioned the fact that it's real important that we control what we're doing in the cash flow business to make it fit within this project. This is difficult, it's not impossible, and it will happen. So it's really encouraging to get all the public, everybody on board that has 2 cents to say about anything, to find out and see how we can address it. Because that's really important in this project.
Can we close with how people can contact you? Do you have an address or website or some sort of email? Or
George has a cell phone and a home number.
I can't remember either number.
No, we'll be happy to. I brought some of George's cards with me that I'll put on the table outside here. But you're welcome to call us anytime. And again, I think it's very important. This project is not being done in a vacuum. The idea is if the public doesn't want to go there, if it's not done well, we all lose. So we have this very similar interest to see it successful. If you don't want to go down there because it doesn't have the cultural interpretive center or trails, the historic interpretive trails and possibly museum, if it's not a comfortable, safe environment where you want to go because there's enough different interests to make you want to go back, then we've been unsuccessful in what we're trying to do. So this is truly, has to be a publicly sensitive development to be successful.
This is just a big backyard. That's all it is. A big backyard for everybody to use. And we just want to make sure that backyard fits within the play of the general public and us to make it all fit and work.
What are you gonna call your new city?
New city?
What was that?
I said, what are you going to call your new city?
We should probably have a contest. Well, City of Tumwater, it's part of Tumwater, and it's really the identity of the community. So the idea here is it's got to reflect that. Olympia Brewery is taken by Pabst. Now, there's a possibility, we've made efforts to try to see if we can bring that back to the area. I know but at the same time, there needs to be kind of, I don't want to say brand, but something that's recognizable. Ghirardelli Square, when somebody mentions that name, you have an instant visual understanding of what you're talking about. That needs to be brought to this project as well.
It'll be a Target type, Nike, Target, a name that's one of a kind that stands by
That's
itself.
not, you don't want a Target sign down there.
You're already a target.
They're ready to
Thank
go.
you. I think they should have a big hand.